Now, the time here is to connect to Business and Immigration Law Update. This is a presentation of attorney and counselor at law, Mr. Ramesh Khurana. Attorney Khurana is the chief attorney at the Khurana Law Firm, located in the heart of Gaithersburg, Maryland. The moderator on this set is Attorney Kenneth Haber from Boyd's, Maryland. Attorney Haber questions Attorney Khurana about the death of a petitioner, humanitarian of a family-based petition. Let's have a look.
Welcome. My name's Kenneth Haber. I'm a former Assistant United States Attorney and I'm a former Senior Attorney in the Office of Inspector General of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. With me today is Ramesh Khurana. Welcome, Ramesh.
Thank you, Ken.
Ramesh is a very renowned immigration attorney who's helped people across the world with their problems, immigration issues here in the United States. And he's here to answer some of our questions on the Capitol Forum. Welcome again, Ramesh.
Thank you for your kind words, Ken.
They're all true. They're all true. I'd like to ask you a little bit, on the other side of the world, or of life. What happens when a person dies and they've got a petition pending? What happens to that petition normally?
This is a very unfortunate situation because sometimes when the petitioners file the petitions for their loved ones, and these loved ones who are the beneficiaries of these petitions, they have to wait for many, many years. Sometimes ranging between 5 years to 10, 12 years, depending upon whether they are siblings or they are sons and daughters, married or single. So it's a very unfortunate situation. But the good news is that there is a provision which is based just on the humanitarian ground. And when we are talking about humanitarian ground, this is a very sound discretion which is vested with the USCIS to exercise that discretionary authority. When we say it's a sound discretion, so they have to basically consider pros and cons, like what are the favorable factors and what are the unfavorable factors. So based on that, the decision will be made.
So I take it that the different scenarios of factors will play out and it becomes the decision of the official in charge of the case that makes that decision.
That's very true, but one thing has to be remembered that law sets forth the day the petitioner of a petition dies, that petition is revoked from the date of the death of the petitioner. But in certain situation, this fact doesn't come to the notice of the USCIS. So you have got to be proactive and you can take certain steps to inform USCIS, and at the same time you can make a request under the humanitarian ground before the petition gets revoked. As I said, otherwise petition will be revoked from the date the petitioner dies.
If you, I imagine that you're trying to reinstate that petition. You proactively go and seek to restate it. I take it that there are certain areas, certain situations when they can grant that type of relief. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's very true. When we say reinstatement, the question of reinstatement arises only when the petition has already been revoked. Sometimes we immigration lawyers come across situation where the people would tell us, oh, my father died last week and my brother is standing in the queue. What do I do? So at this point of time, the petition is still valid. It's not revoked because no one has brought this fact to the attention of USCIS. So that's why I said if you are really proactive, talk to your lawyer, and lawyer can initiate certain positive steps. And one of the positive steps would be that we should file a request with the USCIS informing them voluntarily that this is what has happened, petitioner has died, but at the same time we say that your discretion allows you to allow this petition to continue. How it can continue? You have to be knowledgeable about that. Let us say if a petitioner has died and petitioner has sons, daughters, siblings, spouse. So, there are some relatives who fall within the authorized category. So, one of them come forward and say that I am going to be the sponsor of this petition. What does it mean? That person will have to file an affidavit of support, and the income of that particular person who is coming forward to provide the sponsorship as a substitution of the petitioner, that should be at least 125% of the poverty guidelines. So, if he can make that requirement met with, then he can come as a substitute sponsor and file an affidavit of support.
Is there ever a situation where an individual doesn't have a substitute sponsor, but because of the humanitarian issues involved, that they permit somebody to go forward with the petition?
Very difficult situation. You have just asked me. Unfortunately, answer is no. So, the substitute sponsor has to be out of the categories which have been authorized by USCIS. If anybody, let us say cousins, sometimes cousins are not allowed to come forward as substitute sponsors. So, that beneficiary is out of luck. Another thing I would like to say here, the person who is making an application based on the humanitarian ground, either for reinstatement or continuation of the petition, is the principal beneficiary. It is not like brother of the petitioner or spouse of the petitioner who has died. Now, it is only the beneficiary who has to make this application, and there is no prescribed application, no fees are payable to USCIS. It looks like it is a very simple process, but the type of documentation which is required to be provided, that is very complex, because the onus on you is to convince USCIS, or I always use the word, you have to persuade USCIS to approve the petition. So, it is a very heavy burden on you.
If an individual is petitioning for refugee status, do each of his family members petition, or does he as the family head petition and then they become dependents of his?
Again, the person who is coming forward to provide the affidavit of support, if applicable, that has to be within the authorized category. If somebody who is not within the authorized category, he cannot.
What if there's nobody who's in the United States who is seeking refugee status for a family? Let's say somebody's escaping from, some war-torn country that's not in the Middle East, and I say that so that we're avoiding people being concerned of the safety of the United States. But the family's coming in, from Africa, say, and they're petitioning, and the father dies. Can the children or the mother take over that, or are they all petitioners to begin with? The procedures and rules regarding refugees, those are completely different set of rules. So, when we are talking about the humanitarian grounds relief, so basically we are talking about the family based petitions, where you talk about the family unity, and you talk about the hardship which the beneficiary would experience. Let us say that beneficiary has been living in this country, now he is on an H-1B status. There are 3 brothers, 3 sisters, husband and wife, and the petitioner was the father. Father died of heart attack recently. The question is how this person who is living here, and they can demonstrate that none of their family members is living in India. All of them have moved to the United States. So, it is a question of family unity. You have to document it very well by producing birth certificates, then you have to give the death certificate of the person, then marriage certificate of parents. So, you have to show that it is really going to cause hardship to the person if that person were to go back. And it becomes a little bit easier if the person is sitting here. Sometimes
you have filed a petition for a beneficiary who is sitting in India and he has never been able to come to the United States, or the whole family came and this child was over the age of 21 at the time green cards were issued to the parents and other siblings. He is the only one who was left out because of the aging out. So, he is out of luck because he is the only one who is staying there. But then you have to make your arguments in such a way to demonstrate that this person is the only person who is living in India and he wants to be united with the family, and that is why in the interest of family unity, it is on a humanitarian ground and it has got to be approved. Then you bring somebody who provide the affidavit of support.
What are some of the other requirements that have to be shown in the affidavit of support?
Affidavit of support, there are mainly two requirements. One of the most important is it is to be executed by a person who is within the permitted relationship. Like I said, it could be spouse, it could be the brother, sister, father-in-law, mother-in-law, sister-in-law, but not cousins. And the second important requirement is about the income level. That person must be making an income level of 125% of the poverty guidelines. So, there are different levels. Let us say if that person himself has 3 children and he is the sole bread earner of the family. So, he already is supporting 3 people plus himself 4 people, and if he is supporting this family, so 4 plus this family of 4, 8 people, then income must be equivalent to 125% of the poverty guidelines for 8 people. So, that is the only burden. If you have met these two important burdens and you can show that it is going to cause hardship to the person who is living overseas, chances are it will get approved. But you should make really a very persuasive case. It is not that in the ordinary or routine this type of petition will be approved, because this is on humanitarian ground. That means this is just under the sound discretion of the USCIS. You cannot expect USCIS to approve each and every petition where the sound discretion will not exercise favorably in for the approval of the petition.
Can a grandparent petition?
Yes, grandparents can. Yes.
And what if the grandparents are like really elderly and would not normally have the capacity to raise a child, and then let's say that the parent died and the parent was the one raising a child, and their child is the one that the grandparent has to petition for. I mean, are there certain accommodations that can be made, or does that grandparent have to be able to physically raise that?
In fact, that is not the statutory requirement for the purpose of coming up as a substitute sponsor. Like we talked about 2 factors, and those 2 factors are important for the purpose. You are within the permitted relationship and you are making more than 125% of the income of poverty guidelines. If you have met with these 2 thresholds, there are chances, again, if you have provided very persuasive evidence, the petition might be approved.
So the grandparents could do it and then just turn the child over to a niece or nephew who is actually a cousin of the deceased.
That's a family arrangement, but they are not going to look at this
They're
issue.
not going to bother them with
because as I said, those are the important prongs.
Basically, whether they are
Within the
within the
permitted
relationship
and
of affordability.
poverty guidelines. Yeah.
So then they'll permit them. So
Yeah.
well, that's good. That way, at least the child can come over. You can otherwise have a baby whose grandparent is a U.S. citizen even,
Right.
and they don't have a parent alive, and they could be in some other country, you know, without anybody being able to take care of them and thrown into an orphanage or something.
That's very true. But I have seen the challenging point is, how do you prove that this is a case of hardship to the beneficiary? Remember, let us say mother is living here and mother says that my husband has died and I am experiencing extreme hardship, which is emotional of course, and he says, let my son come. No, that's not going to count. The hardship has to be to the beneficiary and the principal beneficiary.
And the beneficiary is the person who would be coming?
Yes, who is coming and who is getting united with the family.
Well, it'd certainly be a hardship if they can't come over to this country, because if they can't come to this country, it's
Right.
got to be a hardship by definition.
That's right, yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to thank you for coming on in.
Thank you. It was really a very interesting topic. Not that we come across quite often with this kind of situation to deal with, but whenever we have a situation, we put our whole might behind it.
That's right. It's heartbreaking type of situations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.